All right, here to talk Oklahoma State football, Garen Emig, Tulsa World Sports columnist, joined by Eli Lederman, beat writer covering the Cowboys from Stillwater. First things first, Eli, officially welcome to the world, welcome to the beat, welcome to Stillwater. You're doing great work. How's your state of mind a few weeks into the job? You getting everything you want done, and are you all moved in?
90% moved in. That's what this weekend's for, because I know once college football starts, there's not going to be a whole lot of time for hanging pictures, unpacking boxes. So the move mostly there. I'm settling in Stillwater and waiting to take my first breath on the beat. But it's all been great, and we got football to get excited about now.
You've had cheese fries from Joe's, Eskimo Joe's. Is that right?
I've got to do a bit more exploring around here on the food. I've been to Hideaway. But I've got some work to do in terms of my food exploration.
Very cool. Well, you had no choice but to dive straight into OSU football. That's what happens in Oklahoma in August. You've got a full dose of Mike Gundy, Spencer Sanders, Malcolm Rodriguez, and the Cowboys. There's a lot of different ways we can start, but since Gundy has always said that your ranking going into a season or your expectation going into a season is most tied to your quarterback, let's visit a little bit about Spencer Sanders, guy you've gotten to know a little bit, hope to know a lot more, I know, moving forward. His career you've become acquainted with. And as you pointed out in just this week at Gundy's press conference, he certainly has experience going for him. Now it's just a matter of tying some loose ends into that experience and fulfilling his potential, it seems.
Yeah, I mean, I think the part of the question is this year going to look like 2019 when he was the Big 12 Offensive Freshman of the Year, or is it going to look like last year? And I think the confidence that's grown over the course of camp is that he's worked on probably his biggest issue, which is ball security, and improved there. And maybe we won't know if he really has improved until we're watching games in September, October, November. But listening to Mike Gundy speak about him, and we'll hear from Casey Dunn on Tuesday, there seems to be growing confidence that Spencer Sanders is in a good place and that he has improved a bit. And you'd hope that, year three last year was maybe to a degree a bit of a wash with the way the offensive line looked, and missing Chuba Hubbard for a period of time, missing Tylen for some time, and Spencer Sanders himself was injured. So I think, I guess the question will be, was last year, one that fell outside of kind of the realm, or is that the Spencer Sanders we're going to see and that Oklahoma State and the fan base is kind of going to have to grapple with over the course of this season? But I think we'll get a pretty good sense over these first few games in September.
So let's talk about some of the parts around him. It's interesting. You referenced Hubbard and Wallace, guys who weren't completely fit a year ago, and that helped drag OSU down. Well, they're no longer options. They've moved on to the NFL. And yet what's interesting, when you lose two playmakers like that, I get the sense that optimism is at least as high, if not more so, at those positions, especially running back with the depth that we've heard so much about this month. And by the way, it's not just Wallace and at wide receiver. Dylan Stoner, who was such an integral part of the offense the last few years, has also moved on to a pro career. Am I overthinking the fact that that there's a little bit maybe more optimism that you would expect when you lose that kind of proven production?
I think so. I mean, there's probably some confidence in the familiarity of having Spencer Sanders there to run the show, but around him, a lot of faces. They're not necessarily new faces, but guys who weren't in the roles they're going to be in. I mean, running back, they've talked all fall camp about depth and distributing carries, and they released the depth chart yesterday. And you've got LD Brown or Desmond Jackson or Dominic Richardson or Jalen. And Mike Gundy said it yesterday, his ideal game that he might not be able to pull off would be 40 carries total, 10 to each of them. So those four guys are going to get their shot, it seems like, out of the backfield. And that's going to look different from years past, because in the past it was Chuba Hubbard and then whatever was left for the guys behind him. So they're, at least to start off, is not going to be that lead back. And maybe that is better. Maybe that keeps guys fresh, or maybe they're going to hope for a guy to step up. But the running backs will look different, that's for sure. And then at wide receiver, you're right. There's not only is there no Tylen Wallace, but there's no Dylan Stoner, and left to pick up kind of the slack there is Tay Martin, who really didn't get to make his mark until the bowl game last year. And the same can be said for Brennan Presley. And they're probably the two guys you'd look at as the immediate fillers of those roles, and we'll see how well they can do it. But beyond them, it's Braden Johnson, who's a veteran at receiver, and then a lot of freshmen. We know Blake is going to get a start, and that's exciting to see a true freshman who arrived early as an early enrollee in January. So he's been here a lot longer than a lot of the freshmen, and seems like he's proven himself. But there's going to be a lot of new names kind of on the receiving end of a Spencer Sanders pass, and it could be exciting. It could be a little bit of a roller coaster.
I'd ask you about the offensive line, but that's a wait and see for ourselves for sure, isn't it? I mean, I know what Gundy and Casey Dunn have said optimistically about all of the guys who were thrown in way ahead of schedule a year ago. They learned, growing pains, having to take their lumps, that kind of stuff. Now that they have that experience, and now that they have a little bit more reinforcements, they expect better. It's got to be better. We know that, but I don't know if anyone can really say if it will be better, right? Until we see it for ourselves.
I think so. I think, barring injury, which of course none of us can predict, you can at least count on this year, fingers crossed, transfers right before the season. We're not anticipating that. Fingers crossed, knock on wood, all the things you'd hope COVID does not have the same impact on the offensive line this year, but there's no controlling that either. So while there might be a little more stability, then the question is how stable are those guys who are going to be stable? That we don't know who's going to be the full-time starting left tackle. We know it's going to be Taylor Maturko and Caleb Etienne in week one, kind of carrying their position battle into the regular season. And across the line, there's talent. There's Danny Godlewski, who's the transfer center from Miami. And guys, like you said, who got thrown into the fire last year for better or worse, and they're probably better for it. But you're right. There's no guarantees that this offensive line, just because it's maybe more stable, is going to be significantly better or.
It's really odd is talking about an Oklahoma State football team going into a season with the offense needing to sort of rise to the level that the defense has played. That's something that was completely foreign to us for the first 13, 14 years of Mike Gundy's tenure, right? It was typical of a lot of Big 12 schools. If you could ever find a way to tackle somebody, you might have a pretty good football team, right? Well, last year, the issues were on offense. It's too bad because it spoiled a pretty good defensive effort by Jim Knowles' defense. I sort of get the feeling we're in the same place going into this year. If the O-line can gel and be a little bit more strong, if Sanders doesn't make the mistakes he has, if the running backs and wide receivers coalesce to replace Wallace and Hubbard and Stoner, then there's no reason to think this team shouldn't. I picked them third in the Big 12 going into the year. I think they're a little underrated at 4, but I don't think they're that far a step below Oklahoma and Iowa State. Everyone's put them out sort of ahead of the pack. I don't think they're that far below if the offense does come together and play up to what I still think is going to be a really, really good defense.
I think the defense, like you said, it's funny to think about Mike Gundy team where its strength is defense, but you know what? In the SEC, Alabama scoring just as much as the Big 12 teams, and now you got Big 12 teams playing defense, and the whole world of college football just looks different in a whole lot of ways now. But this defense with 8 starters returning, the secondary is just loaded with talent and experience. Guys who've been watching for a few years in that secondary. Malcolm Rodriguez feels like he's been here a long time, and if he's on the field, is going to make however many tackles he's going to finish with. And up front, they have depth and experience. And so it, funnily enough, seems like, once again, the strength of this team that it might lean on really could be that defense. And it might be what helps them close the gap. And it could be what helps. I think the most crucial stretch of the season are those back-to-back road games in October at Texas, at Iowa State. And they'll certainly be determining of where Oklahoma State can be within the Big 12. And it might be the case that it's not the offense, but the defense those weekends that proves the difference.
Yeah, something else interesting that sort of reverses the trend, at least since Gundy's been coach. In the past, the Cowboys have had trouble keeping receivers in front of them and limiting big plays. They have stolen the ball. When Glenn Spencer was coordinator all those years, that's the one thing you could sort of count on them to do now and then, is to make a play just to steal the ball and turn it back over to whether it was Mason Rudolph or Brandon Whedon to do big things on offense. It's interesting to hear OSU defenders and Jim Knowles this month talk about the need to get back to that. I mean, they've sort of plugged the holes in terms of, getting killed by 80-yard bombs, giving up 40 to 50 points. That part's a lot better. They're more consistent that way. Now they got to be a little bit more dynamic and stealing the ball. I think that's an interesting point and a valid one when you consider their takeaways haven't been what I think that the number that Gundy's used to seeing.
Yeah, I think they've talked a bit during fall camp about implementing a bit more zone defense into things, and it's a Big 12 defense. It's not Mike Gundy's defense, but it's Mike Gundy defense. They're still going to play plenty of. But I think the goal of implementing zone is to create some opportunities and give guys opportunities to make plays and to turn the ball over. It also might be a way of protecting someone like Christian Holmes at cornerback. And to his credit, he was fantastic last year, but even Jared Bernard-Converse last year, he got to play with the cushion of Rodarius Williams. This year,
right.
He's high. So the zone probably protects the secondary as a whole a bit as well in certain situations, but I also think it's a way for them to create a little chaos and give their playmakers, and they have plenty of them in the secondary, chances to make those plays. And that would seem to be the goal coming from Jim Knowles and those guys in the secondary.
Everyone zeroes in on Sanders by proxy. He's a quarterback, of course they do, but even more so, again, with Wallace and Hubbard moving on, it's really easy to land on him as the key to Oklahoma State's offense. I know Gundy's going to talk about the O-line. You can only do what you can block. I get it. Still going to start with Spencer Sanders. Who's that guy for you on OSU's defense? Is there such a guy until you see him play?
I mean, in terms of a centerpiece, got to watch, it feels like it has to be Malcolm Rodriguez. Being a fixture of this defense really since he joined it. I mean, when he was a safety, he was making plays, moved to linebacker and only got better. And this kind of feels like his year. It's his defense. And next to him, I think Devin Harper is going to be a really interesting partner. He's somebody who has been productive. I mean, it's his 6th year with the team. It's been productive for most of them. But whether it was injury or depth chart, never quite cracked, full-time starting role. And here he is. With loads of experience, and Jim Knowles spoke really highly of him earlier in camp. And so it'll be interesting to see the way he kind of fills into that defense. But for whatever losses there are at the linebacker position, he fills that pretty well.
You've already mentioned the back-to-back in October, right, with that road trips to Texas and Iowa State. That's obviously the pivot point to this season for the Cowboys, at least until they get to Bedlam. And won't that be interesting given everything that's happened off the field for the last month? We have plenty of time to get to that. We're still a little ways from October, although those are 2 critical weeks, obviously, for the Pokes. What about September? Let me ask you this. Are you more intrigued by, we're going to just blow right by Missouri State. No apologies to our friends in Springfield. Are you more intrigued by Tulsa or Boise State? Given how hard TU played OSU, right, a year ago in Stillwater, and how difficult they made that game, and given maybe the marquee value of a matchup with the Broncos, what do you like there?
I mean, at the risk of upsetting my friends down the turnpike in Tulsa, I think this Tulsa team is probably a bit different this year. I mean, it starts with not having Zaven Collins and goes down from there. And so I view probably the earliest test up until those back-to-back weekends probably being Boise State on the road, September 18th. I think that's as much having to do with what Boise State might be this year. I mean, it's been a time since they haven't been a strong program. They do have a first-year head coach following the departure of Brian Harsin, but that one, as much to me, is just about a road trip under the lights. Who knows what the blue turf does to you in Boise. But that to me feels like the true first test, and it'll shoot them right into the Big 12. And that really could be the tone setter. As much as those games in October will matter, a big win on the road at Boise sends you into Big 12 play one way. A loss there where you maybe feel like you missed some chances or you weren't ready for those lights, that sets a very different tone and heading into conference play, and really could be as determining as any of the conference matchups down the way.
Last thing I touched just in passing about the off the field stuff for the last month. Do you subscribe to the theory that the Cowboys can prop themselves up with a really strong football season? Will it help their profile, their brand, however you want to describe it, moving forward in terms of obviously the Pac-12 temporarily at least that ship has sailed, but you still want to prop up your program, whatever future you face, and it's going to get a little dicey when Oklahoma and Texas leave the Big 12. Does this season become important even more so? Is what I'm asking you because of the events of the last month.
I think so. I think it really this fall for the larger Big 12, and I almost say the Big 12, accepting the 2 teams that are going to leave it. So the 8 teams remaining, this feels like, obviously a crucial time, but a season where they can maybe prove to themselves and to the country that they are bigger than OU and Texas. Iowa State is probably coming off one of its best seasons in program history and has a shot at even topping that this year. Oklahoma State is right there. I think, as a team that should probably be in and around the top 25, and we see where they go. So I think for the conference as a whole, proving itself to everybody as we are more than the 2 teams leaving, whether that's the case, is important. Then for Oklahoma State itself, they've kind of predicated the good position they're in, which they keep telling us we're well positioned for this. And a lot of that is on the success of this football program, first and foremost. So I do think it's crucial that they maintain that kind of the winning here, and that outside looking in, look at them, that there's success here. But we also know that winning only does so much. Without taking a shot at Texas, the last 10 years haven't been spectacular, and they had no problem jumping to the SEC, and that's just the nature of things. So. But certainly winning can't hurt when you're looking to bring in new people or attract attention elsewhere.
That's good stuff. And he'll have plenty more of it over the course of this football season. And then as he transitions into what is going to be a very interesting OSU basketball season as well under Mike Boynton, now that he no longer has Cade Cunningham to play with, but still a pretty stacked roster. We'll get to hoops soon enough, Eli. In the meantime, thank you so much for your insight on OSU football, continued success covering the Cowboys. And with your resettlement there in Stillwater, I hope that continues to go well for you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Garen.